This video is sponsored by Modiphius.
Looking for a fast-paced miniatures game that doesn't take an age to learn or play? A game that you can spend probably just an afternoon painting up the contents of the box? Then Hardwar is the game for you. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Now, recently I attended the UK Games Expo, or UKGE for short. Now, it's a great event, been many times. It is quite overwhelming, lots to see, but one of the things I did want to do was attend the Modiphius stand and try out a game they've got called Hardwar. Now, if you're regulars of the channel, you will know I am not great with rule books and big chunky rule systems. And I really want to play like a mech game, or a game with lots of tanks and mechs that isn't like, well, it doesn't require many evenings of study and reading. I just want to get into it and shoot some stuff and blow things up. Now, Battletech is something I probably will feature on the channel at some point, but I've heard the rules are quite crunchy and it's quite in depth. But I think Hardwar is the game that really floats my boat because you don't need a lot of figures. It's quite quick and easy to pick up from a rules point of view, and I had a lot of fun. Now, I was super eager to give the game a go, but I was a little bit apprehensive because it's a new rule system. I'm always a bit like intimidated by new rules, and I don't want to look dumb in front of other people. I was playing against Dan from Odd Void as well, so Heretic Hunt. So if you've seen me doing a role play with Dan, that's the games master. He's great fun. We had a fun time. But yeah, the only rule mechanic that threw me a little bit, and that was just initially, was the mechanic for like shooting, doing the firepower, the defense. It was new to me, but I really liked the mechanic. Once I got my head around it and it was explained to me, it made a lot of sense. And I will cover that in a bit in case someone else is like me and has the same issue, like, how does that work? But actually, once you find out how it works, it's like really easy and straightforward. But enough about that, let's talk about Hardwar, or also as it's known, hardware warfare, which is a game system based in the not too distant future. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from the book, not a lot, just a paragraph or two, about what is Hardwar. Now, the turn of the 22nd century was a time of great progression for the human race. Space exploration, scientific and technological advancements. It's also a time of neo-colonialism and a new order emerging from the pyres of the old order. It was a time for a new war, also known as a hard war. See, saying it again. It's a time of warfare fought by privately owned, mostly remotely operated armoured assets, engaged in fast-moving, small-scale actions against military, police and security forces, and on occasion against rival commercial forces. Ooh, corporations duke it out like that. Now, I got a copy of the Quick Start rules, which anyone can get a copy of because it's free on Modiphius' website. So if you are watching this video going, oh, I'll be interested in giving the game a go, just go into the website, add it to cart, doesn't cost a penny. You just need to obviously make an account if you don't have one already. There will be a actual hardback rulebook, very similar to the 5 parsecs, 5 leagues of the Borderlands rule sets. I believe it's that size. So if you're familiar with those books from Modiphius, it should fit nicely on your shelf with the other similar sized books. Now, the time this video goes out, the Kickstarter will be up and running, so do check it out. I think it runs to the end of July, so the 31st of July. So if you are interested, you've got plenty of time. Now, on the Kickstarter, you will get the full rulebook, which comes with loads of rules, including rules for 9 factions, and those rules vary from like co-op play, cooperative play, some special skills, feats, some special characters, rules for flyers, all sorts of cool stuff like that. Now, the scale of the miniatures is 6mm, so small enough not to take up too much space, but still get like a decent tactical game going on. But what's also great about the scale is it's perfect for quick and faff-free paint jobs because they are quite small, got lots of detail on it, so you can cut a lot of corners. Not at all to take away from Callum and Rose's amazing paint jobs. If you want to do that, because you're probably going to get 8 or 9 vehicles anyway, you can. But if you're like me and you want to get stuff on the tabletop pretty quickly and play some games, then, well, hold fire for another 5 minutes or so and I'll show you some paint guides. Now, let's have a quick overview of the rules. So the rules follow an alternative activation system. Now, if you're not used to what that means, that basically means I move a miniature and do his actions, and then you move a miniature and do your actions, and we continue leapfrogging like that until we've all moved our models and the turn is over, and then we cycle again. It's quite a fun, there's a lot of games that follow that kind of mechanic, and I really like that mechanic because you're not spending ages waiting for turns to end before you get your turn, like you would get with like 40k or Warhammer. They can be quite tedious and long-winded, but alternate activation game systems I think are great for skirmish and fast-paced games. Now, every model or vehicle or element, as it's known in the game, gets to perform 2 actions when it's activated. This could be a move, this could be a shoot. You get something called aim shot, where you sacrifice both actions for more improved firing. You get something called advancing fire, which is great because you can move and fire, but your shooting is radically reduced, like half. Now, another action is guard. If you're familiar with the rule Overwatch from other game systems, it's pretty much that. If you're not, what it basically means is you save an action and you use it later on in the turn. So if something moves into line of sight, certainly something that's like really powerful, then you get to perform your action then. So it's kind of out of sequence, and it's really good for like ambushing stuff, especially big mechs or tanks that have been like plaguing your guys for a little while, because they can do that. There's also some special actions like pump smoke. They vary depending on what kind of vehicle you've got, or you could just do nothing. You could just use your turn up and do nothing with it, which is also a viable option. I mean, you know, you could be like, well, I'm just going to wait. I'd probably recommend going on guard, to be honest, but yeah, doing nothing is there. Obviously having a tea break, more than likely. Now, what I'm going to do here is just quickly cover over the sort of shooting mechanic. Just going to have some visuals and just explain how it kind of works, because I thought it'd be quite good fun just to show some vehicles shooting at each other. Not really shooting at each other, but you can pretend they're shooting at each other. When you're watching this, just make pew pew noises. Now, the shooting mechanic is super fun. There's no max range on weapons. If you can see it, then you can shoot it. However, there is a cost there. The longer the range, the more difficult the hit's going to be. Now, you add up any range in inches. You also add any A or armor values of the enemy vehicles or elements, and any cover bonuses. Now, this will depend on the cover, but most cover you're looking at like +1 for each inch of cover. There is a max of 6, because once you're like so far into cover, then you're pretty much obscured. So once you get to 6, you're like, no, you can't see it, so you're not going to shoot at it, which I think is a great little sort of cap on that as well. Then what you do is you add all these together. So you add in the range in inches, you add in any cover bonuses, and you add in the armor value there, and the total is what you'll need to cause a hit. And let's say in this example, it's going to be 12. So 12 is the number you're trying to get. Now, you roll a number of dice represented by your current F or firepower value. So if we're using the gear on here, that's got a value of 3. So you basically roll 3 dice here. The enemy then rolls a number of dice represented by their current D or defense value. Let's say we're going with the Montgomery here, which has a value of 2. So they'll roll 2 dice. Now, you roll your dice and you can sort what you rolled. The enemy then removes any numbers that match your roll. So in this example, if the defender or the Montgomery has rolled a 3 and an 8, and my attack roll for my gear on is a 5, an 8 and an 8, then I've got to remove that 8 from my results, because one of those matches the defenders. Then what the commander does is he basically makes groups of dice, depending on how many dice you got. Some vehicles have loads, but in this instance, I've only got 2 dice left. I've got a 5 and an 8. I group them together, try and beat that number of 12. Here I've got 13, so I've caused a single hit on the Montgomery. Now, if you do get double numbers, so if I was able to secure both of those 8s, that becomes a critical, so that adds an extra point of damage as well, which is really, really cool. So getting doubles is good. But yeah, I do like that mechanic because it's good fun. There is a little bit of like tactics involved, because obviously I've got to get a certain amount of numbers, but the opponent obviously needs to try and match them in mine to stop me. But yeah, as mechanic goes for shooting, it took me a turn or two to get my head around it, but I really like it because it's quite a little bit of fun. It's almost like a little micro game, because what you're trying to do is work out how many dice you've got to try and get that number, which was the 12, but then your opponent's obviously rolled some numbers, they've removed a critical. You're like, oh, I was really hoping to get a critical. So it is quite a little bit of like light-hearted fun when your opponent's like rolled a couple of numbers and you're just like, nearly had a critical, is going to blow you up, but next time. Now, when it comes to painting, I want to kind of cover this guide in a way that kind of gets on the tabletop quite quickly. I don't want to be like faffing around with lots of details. You can do that if you're an expert painter and you just want to know about the game. Obviously, skip this guide. There might be some things in there that might be useful, I don't know. But really, the point of this guide is to get stuff on the tabletop quite quickly so you can play games. Now, spray paints and dry brushing was my ally in this paint guide. I like to dry brush over like small things like this because they've got lots of texture on them, because they're all like mechanical details and armored details with like turrets and stuff. So they are very forgiving when it comes to dry brushing. I also like to do like a couple of spray paints. Now, the red ones I just sprayed red. The green ones, initially I did like a sort of more emeraldy dark green and then dusted over more of a military green. But honestly, I didn't really like that first green coat. It was more of a test, and I should have done one test model before I did the whole lot. As you can see here, I did the whole lot and then went, oh, never mind. Now, one thing I'll mention later on when it comes to paint guide is there was a lot of that green in the recesses, that first green, which was a little bit off-putting when I first started painting, but I knew, because from experience, that when I applied some washes and some weathering, that's going to get hidden anyway by the washes. So don't stress it. If you have done a similar thing to what I've done here, don't stress it. It's just one of those things. You can just cover that with a wash anyway. But yes, dry brushes are your friend. Now, when it came to the whole process of building, painting and basing, it was about 8 hours, give or take 20 minutes or something like that. It was about an hour and a half to build everything. So that was including cleaning up. probably people are going to say, that's probably why you missed loads of mold lines, Peach, because you did it in an hour and a half. I just want to get built. All right, don't judge me. That obviously includes the spraying as well. And then the painting itself, like I think one faction was like 3 hours. The other one was like 2.5 hours. And then the actual base in itself was whatever time was left was about, what, half an hour, something like that. But yeah, it didn't take long. Now that 8 hours to me is like, that's a day's worth of filming. But for folks at home, that you're gonna have to chunk that up maybe over across a weekend or across a couple of nights or maybe a week or so. Anyway, I'm waffling. Let's look at painting some Syndicate Taskforce. That's the first one. That's the red ones. So first up, I'm just going to be spraying with a nice dark red. Any kind of red will do. It's entirely up to you. Don't even have to spray in red. You can spray in black and then dry brush them darker red. But yeah, just get them coated. Now the first colour I'm going to be using is going to be Beret Maroon. And I'm going to be dry brushing this over the top of the vehicle. So as always, just grab yourself some wood or some cardboard, or as I'm using here, some tissue paper, and then remove as much as you can, and then just gently start flicking over the surface area. Like I said, these vehicles are perfect for dry brushing and spraying, as they have lots of texture, armor panels, so as you can see, it just picks it out straight away. Now in reality, when I was dry brushing this, it was very obvious the edges were being picked out, but I guess from the angle here, especially with the shine of the spray, it's probably not as noticeable. So I do apologize if it doesn't look like the dry brushing right now has done anything, but trust me, it definitely has. Now what I'm going to do is get some masking tape. I'm going to mark off some areas, maybe do some stripes down the hull or some little sections here and there. But what I'm going to do is just place it on. And in some places, especially because there's lots of small little details, is maybe use some tweezers for a little bit more fine tuning and making sure it's in those nooks and crannies. And then once I've got my masking tape on, all I'm going to then do is get myself some old sponge. Now this could be like packing sponge from like figure cases or whatever. Get yourself a brush sleeve, just drop it in there. Learned this from Daz Laven many moons ago. That would do the job, it's fine. Then what I'm going to do is get some Fiendish yellow, apply it to the sponge, and then just dab it off a little bit like dry brushing. And then it's just a matter of stabbing over the areas that you've got marked off. Again, don't have to be too precious, because you can always add a little bit of paint later on with like a brush if you need to make sure it's a little bit neater or whatever. Very satisfying pulling the masking tape off, I won't lie. Things like the gun barrels, I want to pick out some of those with yellow as well. So I'm just doing that now. Again, I could do this with a brush if I wanted to, but I had the sponge ready. Now across the models, there's lots of little panels and details. So what I'm going to do is just pick out a few here and there with some yellow. Quite like these little diamond sections or panels or whatever they are. So I'm just going to pick those out with yellow. Now Fiendish yellow over red actually is going over quite well, so I probably won't even need to do a second coat. In other areas like here, I'm just going to mark off and do a little thinner stripe on the walker. Again, entirely up to you how you want to mark them off. This is just me just doing it because I just want a stripe going down the middle. Other areas, you could use the edge of the brush. So if you've got like little fine thins like these, just run the edge of the brush along it. And if you want to be super clever, after you've done a stripe down the middle, you can always use those bits that are sticking out, like the fins at the back here, and then just stab those with yellow. So you get yourself some extra markings for free. You can see just there. Nice and simple. Then what I'm going to do is get some silver or some gunmetal, and I'm going to dry brush quite heavily on any areas I want to look a little bit more metallic, or areas that have been chipped. So things like the tracks, I'm going to do that quite heavily. Again, a lot of the wash is going to solve this problem later on. It might seem red in the recesses, but once I've done the wash over the top of it, that's going to hide a lot of that red in the cracks. But yeah, just go around, dry brush any areas you feel that may have been chipped or maybe a little bit more worn. Maybe pick out the odd barrel here and there. Entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong way. I'm just doing this the way I want to do it. As you can see, I'm dry brushing the barrel, but you can always do it with a more fine detail brush instead. Entirely up to you. But yeah, just work your way around, pick out what areas you want, have some fun, don't overthink it, just make it a little bit worn. You don't even have to make them look worn. You can keep them all fresh and straight from the factory. Entirely up to you. Over the cockpit, I'm just going to do a bit of a heavy dry brush. I might keep it silver, I might change it to another colour. Obviously can't forget the working parts on the wings of the flyer as well. So what I'm going to do is just douse the whole model in wash. That's going to go in lots of the cracks. So any areas that have got like red in the recesses where I've done some silver, that's just going to look dark and shadowy. Again, just pool it in places. You can always add some water in areas if you want it a little bit thinner, if you don't want it too neat. But yeah, work your way around, getting those recesses to look nice and grimy and weathered. And there we are. Once the model's dry, you can just base it up and it's ready for the tabletop. Or you can add some extra details, which is what I'm going to do now. Now for things like sensors or lenses, I'm going to pick them out with Eternal Hunt first. So just get some nice bright green. So just go around, find any kind of sensors or lenses, or whatever this is on his arm, maybe some kind of readout, heads-up display, getting some place you might want to do second coat, find any other little lenses that you've got. Again, these lenses will vary from vehicle to vehicle. Then I'm going to get some rainforest and just use this as a little highlight on those sensors and lenses. Again, you don't have to go over the top, but I'm just making this look more like some kind of readout of some kind. bit of fun. Now for the canopy, I decided I'm going to go for green in the end. So I've got some Guardian green and just base coated that over the silver. Again, if you want to, you could use speed paint for this, or you could just leave it silver, entirely up to you. And whilst doing this, I'm going to try and leave the frame of the canopy silver as well. But if I do make any mistakes, I can always tidy up at a later point. Now I was aware when I did the heavy dry brushing of silver, that section in the middle probably should have been red. So I'm just going to put that out in black just to help break the shape up a little bit more and add a little bit more visual interest. And of course you can carry this theme on to other vehicles or walkers in your set as well. So that's what I'm just doing here, just picking out the odd panel, adding a little bit more black to the gun. Then on the canopy, I'm just going to get some silver and tie up any mistakes where I've probably got some green on it. So I'm just going to work around and do that now. And for the domed head on this walker, I'm just going to add a little bit more punch. It was dulled down a little bit after that shade. Now onto basing, so what I'm going to do is get myself some texture paint, apply it to the base. Just going to be quite thick and goopy to start off with, just get that placed on in places. Then what I like to do to make it a little bit easier is add water and then start manipulating the actual texture around the tracks and stuff. The great thing as well is because it's watered down in places, I can then add this into the tracks to make the vehicle look like it's a bit more embedded and there's all dirt and stuff inside the tracks. Again, you don't have to do this. Now initially I applied it quite neat on that track, so if I added just a little bit more water, it will thin it down and go in the cracks a little bit more and then look a little bit more natural maybe. But yeah, I'm going for a bit more of a dusty, dirty, sandy vibe with these guys. So again, just work your way around. And then to give you the impression that the tank's actually been moving across the ground, I'm just going to get my brush and then place it at the base of the tracks and then drag it out to give that sense that tracks are actually embedded in the ground. And to make walkers look more embedded, you can just build up the texture around the feet as well a little bit, so it looks like they're a bit more sunk in the ground. Once the texture's fully dry, I'm just going to get some military shade, apply it on neatly to start off with, and then what I'm going to do is just thin that down in water so it's a little bit more lighter and not too neat and strong. Just gives you a little green tone to that sand. It makes it look more like an arid landscape, then with a little bit of greenery involved. But yeah, work your way around, do all the bases, add water if you need to, or keep some areas a bit neater, entirely up to you. Then I'm going to dry brush over the bases with some ancient stone, but I'm also going to use this on the vehicles as well to give a sense of dustiness, like it's been driving through like the desert or whatever. But also by doing this dry brush all over, not only does it make them look dusty and weathered, but it also ties them on the base a little bit nicer as well. Again, you can be a little bit heavy, a little bit lighter. You can always go to a smaller brush, entirely up to you. Maybe the base of the legs are a bit more heavy in dry brushing, a little bit lighter at the top. No right or wrong way. You don't even have to do this if you don't want to. You want them nice and shiny. Entirely up to you. Now, one of my favourite parts is adding static grass or little grass tufts to the bases. Now here, because these are quite large tanks, I want to give a sense of like these maybe are like hedgerows or like big sections or maybe crops and stuff like that. So all I'm doing here is just place them down to give a sense of bushes or hedges. Obviously it's a very small scale, so you just got to imagine it, I guess. If you have small scale details like, I don't know, buildings or walls or anything like that, you can always add those as well if you feel the need to. But yeah, these are quite small tufts, so they scale quite nicely with the vehicles and gives a sense, like I said, of bushes or shrubbery or hedgerows or whatever. Probably do the odd tiny tree actually, to be fair, but no matter, it looks fine. And if you feel it needs it, you can always add a little bit of shade around the edges to give some more definition to your hedgerows or crops or whatever they are. No right or wrong way. Maybe even paint it so it looks like a road. And after basing, I realised that the canopy could do with a little bit more shine, so I just added some gloss varnish to the actual green sections of the canopy. 2 coats, 1 coat, entirely up to you, but once it dries it looks nice and shiny, looks like glass. There we are, the Syndicate Taskforce is done. Pretty chuffed overall. Obviously they're never going to win any painting competitions, but they're pretty quick to do. Look, coming in around about the 3-hour mark, so I'm pretty chuffed with that. Adding that little bit of yellow in there as well really helped just add a little bit of visual interest. That's sometimes one way of like helping yourself out from, you know, if you're not great at painting or you really struggle to get things done, just like an offset little color here or like doing some markings or something, just like one little thing can actually bring a little bit more life. What I did like actually initially when I'd done like the yellow and the reds and the blacks and the silvers on them, I was a bit like, they're missing something. Once I based them and did that kind of dusty sort of beige dry brush over everything, I think that's what kind of gave it a bit more of a realistic look, and I really like that. Matched in with the base a bit more. So I think, yeah, I'm a big fan of that, and I'll make sure I do that on the green dudes as well. Right, speaking of the green dudes, let's paint some Consortium Security Task Force. No, oh my God, Consortium Security Squadron. See, I'm struggling with the names. There's so many names. There's only 2 each, and they're really easy to remember. First, I'm going to spray all my Consortium vehicles with a nice dark green. I have to do a couple of coats, but then I realised it wasn't quite military enough, so I decided to get some death rattle green and then give a little dust over the top, leaving that darker green in the recesses. Then to add a little bit more punch to that green, I'm going to get some necrotic flesh and then just gently dry brush over. Again, these vehicles are great because they've got the texture there. Dry brushing is your friend. So just work your way round, peck out any edges. Again, depend on the vehicle, whether that's a walker or a tank or a flyer. Now, in the recesses of some of these vehicles, the green's a bit funny, but don't worry because once we put some shades on that later on in the steps, that will disappear when the shade's on there. So don't stress it. If you have sprayed your models and they look a little bit weird in the cracks, the shade's going to hide it. Then for the markings of the vehicles, I'm going to do exactly what I did with the Syndicate vehicles when I sponged on some yellow. But if you need to, you can always use some tweezers for a little bit more fine tuning with that masking tape. Then I'm going to get some off-white or brain matter beige here, and I'm just going to sponge that all over. I'm also going to incorporate the gun here as well, so I thought that'd be quite nice to have the actual gun and barrel picked out in the marking too. But initially just sponge quite lightly. You can always add a bit more pressure if you need it to be a bit neater or a bit more heavy. And in some places, that sponge isn't always going to earn the crack, so you can always get a brush and add that by hand if you need to. I really do find tearing off that masking tape super satisfying. Again, the green in the cracks looks quite weird, but again, that shade will hide that, so don't stress it. But what I'm going to do now is just go around and pick out some more sections or details in that brain matter beige. It could be like sections on wheels, panels on the armor. Again, whatever suits you, whatever looks right. I'm not actually really thinking about this. I'm just going from each model and then just doing something different with each one to make them look a little bit unique from each other. But very similar to what I did with the flyer with the Syndicate scheme. I'm going to put my masking tape down, but I'm just going to be a little bit tactical and then just, well, do the guns on the side as well as that strip in the middle. Just a quick and easy way of doing it, isn't it? And again, voila. Markings done. Then for any tracks or like chipping, I'm going to get some silver and then dry brush around those areas. I want to look a little bit chipped, weathered, or just look like tracks. Again, I'm going to do a little dry brushing here and there on some of the markings and pick out any like barrels of the guns. You can also sponge on some chipping as well. So on the white sections or even on like the green, you can just get some gunmetal and then just sponge that on. Entirely up to you. Kind of makes it look a little bit more chipped as well, certainly on those whiter panels. Then for any lenses, scopes or sensors, I'm going to pick those out with red, which is kind of the opposite colour to what I did with the Syndicate. They are green lenses. These green ones I've got red lenses. Just from a colour point of view, it just works. Again, just pick out any lenses you want to. You don't have to. Don't even have to do them red. You can do them whatever colour you want to. And I get some dark olive. This is one of the new World War II paints. I really like it. It's kind of like a really dark, dirty brown, but not quite brown, kind of grey too. And I'm just going to sponge over those markings and the hull. Looks quite nice. Gives it a nice finish. And then for the canopy of my flyer, I'm going to pick this out in black. Now, initially, if you want to, you can be quite neat and just avoid the frame and leave that green. Or if you're like me and impatient, you can just paint the whole lot black. And maybe pick it out later in another colour or whatever. Entirely up to you. No right or wrong way. Whatever works for you, really. Looks quite sinister with black. It kind of reminds me of the stuff from Avatar, not the human forces from Avatar. Don't know why. Now, for a little bit of extra punch, I'm going to pick out any rockets or missiles with some yellow. I just thought that was quite cool on the tips. Add a bit more visual interest as well. Then I'm going to get some wash. I'm going to douse the models in that wash. I'm going to be a bit more heavy in those cracks where there's some of that green is shown through, some of that lighter green. It's supposed to be dark green, but with a resin, kind of like made it look a bit lighter. But again, once the shade's on, you're just not going to notice it. You can always add a second coat if it's still there. And then for the lenses, I'm just going to add a little bit more punch to them by getting some lighter red, and this is pure red, and just doing like little dots here and there, just to make it look, well, a little bit more brighter. Again, you can use whatever colour lenses you want to. It could be yellow, could be white, could be blue. No right or wrong way. So there we go, the Consortium elements are done. I am a fan of green and cream. I think it looks visually pleasing. Now added in like a little bit of yellow to like the missiles and rockets on like one of the walkers and the gunship. Added a little bit more visual sort of interest and texture to the model. I know there's kind of yellows on the red ones, the Syndicate, but I just thought it would look quite nice. Green, cream and yellow looks quite good. And hopefully a small human will be like, green looks cool, Dad. Let's play some games, let's blow some stuff up. So overall, I think the game itself is really good fun, really fast paced, really easy to get into. Myself and Dan had a great time at the UK Games Expo as well. So big shout out again to the guys at Modiphius for teaching us how to play and also for sponsoring the video as well. Thank you for sponsoring the video. Kind of wanted to talk about this. You want to do a video. It was a marriage made in heaven. And I had a great time playing and painting. So, you know, it's win for everybody. And I get to tell all my audience and all the beautiful people out there about this game called Hardwar. So if it is your kind of thing, floats your boat, because I don't really cover many sort of small scale stuff. Yes, I kind of did, I guess, the Carthaginians and Romans for the Hail Caesar stuff, but I do want to do more mech kind of game based stuff, like I said, Battletech earlier. So this is like a nice way to see, you know, if people want to see like little paint jobs. And maybe I might do some more down the line and spend a little bit more time on it. Now, as I mentioned, I do get overwhelmed by rules. I do find some rules can be quite complex and kind of like, you know, make me a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure about this game. Hardwar didn't do that. It's really easy to get into. Like I said, my only sort of like initial speed bump, I guess, from like a rules point of view was that mechanic for the firepower, adding in your range, adding in your firepower, their defense, and then trying to match dice and stuff. That took me like a turn or two to get my head around. Once I did, it made sense. That's not because it's a terrible rule or anything, it's just because I'm not used to that kind of rule. But once I got my head around it, which wasn't very long, it was really straightforward actually, which is kind of why I wanted to briefly cover it in this video, just to go over it in case someone else has a similar sort of journey that I do when it comes to rules. I'm not assuming anyone's dumb like me. We're all smart people out there. So yes, great game. Really enjoyed it. Really fast paced. Would like to cover more sort of like small scale stuff actually thing on the channel. So if you did like seeing like small little tanks being painted and you're like, oh, that's quite good. Thank you. More small stuff, please, Peach. Then I'll do some more small stuff. As always, massive thank you to my patrons for your support. You guys are the bestest. Can't wait for PeachCon to see who I can see. And obviously anyone that isn't native to the UK, sorry, so sorry. Big thank you to my viewers for watching. You know, as always, I appreciate you stopping by and watching the video, especially if you got to this point. You're dedicated. I love you very much for doing that. Thank you for the support. Now, if you have found something from this video that's like helpful, let me know in the comments. If you've got any cool tips for painting small vehicles as well, also please throw that in the comments as well. But I'm just gonna go off now and try and convince Charlie to play Hardwar. I've got Green Guys. That is definitely sort of like gonna be a positive. But he likes big tanks. The boy likes big tanks. So I might just do like a PowerPoint presentation, maybe a TED talk about scale, like, you know, looking at model railways and like N gauge and O gauge, and then maybe move through like the different scale systems of like 1/72 all the way up to like 1/6 scale or 1/4 scale. Probably lost him already if I even started doing that part. So yeah, probably not going to do that. Probably won't do a TED talk about scale. I'll just say they're just really big tanks, just small versions of big tanks, really big tanks, just shrunk down. There's actual men inside of them. There's not. You won't know. Anyway, waffling. As always, that's what I do. I waffle. Love you all. See you soon. Bye-bye. Peachy out. Mwah.